They didn't believe in the market size. I felt like I had to justify our existence as a company.
This is Funded, a show where founders who raised millions in venture capital share the gritty side of what it actually took to get that money in the bank. I'm Jason Ye. Not too long ago, I was trying to get my ideas funded. And back in the day, I was a VC listening to founders pitch me for money. A lot of founders I see who came from the investor side of the table to become operators do so with a clear plan, with what seems like a clearer and safer path because they're just too aware of all the landmines in the startup battlefield. Today's guest chose the opposite. Ariana Thacker walked away from her own successful VC fund, an extensive network of LPs, and a career she had already proven to build a company her peers told her not to start. Too fringe, too weird, too small. Why walk away from life as a VC? But Ariana had lived the problem personally and seen the gaps in the science. She had conviction about a market no one else believed existed. Today, Ariana is the founder and CEO of Mold.Co, America's leading mold-specialized clinic that recently announced an oversubscribed $8 million round co-led by Cantos and Collaborative Fund in one of the toughest healthcare markets in years. In our conversation, she shared how she had to let go of her investor identity, how rejections shaped the early rounds, and when the fundraising tide finally turned in her favor. But before we get into all of that, we started at the same place we always do, with what Ariana was like as a kid.
So super early days as a kid, I'm talking elementary school, I always thought I was going to be an artist. I would spend a lot of time painting. I taught myself how to paint. I took classes on it actually at the local community college, and I just really loved that. And I had this vision to be an artist. When I was in middle school, I actually joined something called the Science Academy, where we were taught AP and even college level biochem and physics in 7th and 8th grade. And I was the top student in that class. And it wasn't, I think, due to any inherent gifts. It was, I just really loved science and I was just obsessive with it and studied nonstop. I even laminated my notes to learn in the shower. Like I was that obsessed with learning the sciences. And since then, I stayed on that path. I just wanted to keep learning.
It's a funny flip-flop, like polar opposites of art and science. I'd be curious, what were your role models growing up? Like parents, were they scientists? Were they entrepreneurs? Like what were the big influences in your life there?
Yeah, neither of my parents went to college. I think I didn't grow up with many role models. It was just kind of discovering the world and learning as much as possible. And there were just a lot of things I liked about the people around me. I didn't really have one specific role model, but I would borrow aspects of what I admired in others, and I would get introduced to new concepts and ideas and then go down that rabbit hole. So it was just a lot of that. I wish I had a defined role model growing up.
The thing that I'm want to tease out is, like, 12-year-old middle school Ariana, or even into high school. Did you have a thought for what you might do as a career? Did you have any dreams about what you would become?
Super high level. I knew I wanted to get into something related to business. It wasn't a deeper thought than that. But on the science side, I was just I was infatuated by everything. When I learned physics, that was my favorite subject. When I learned chemistry, that became my favorite subject. I just love just the general sciences and learning, and anything technical I would just pick up and run with and purchase textbooks, ask a lot of questions, do a lot of online research. So that's what I was doing in my free time. It was just being a student of the sciences.
Yeah, it definitely feels like, as I look at your background and where you've been, it's kind of just been a iterative and continuous learning process of pulling on the thread. And I can even see how it all probably strung together. That's probably part of the more common arc of an interview for you. And I read a lot about how Mold.Co started, and your own personal struggles with this. Where I wanted to shift the conversation, obviously, we're talking about a podcast called Funded, and where we like to dig in is just how this whole this whole process and this approach to capitalizing your company came about. At the very beginning of Moldco, you were a venture capitalist before, so you go in eyes wide open. And I wonder if at the beginning of Moldco, if you're like, oh, I'm definitely going to raise a ton of money for this company, or if there was a different approach or a different perspective around how you thought about this company that you were going to build.
Um, I wasn't so optimistic going in, mainly because I was getting a lot of feedback to not build this company. I was getting a lot of commentary from my peers that the market's too small. No one really did in-depth market diligence, by the way. I had very strong conviction around the market size, so that objection I didn't really take to heart. But a lot of people just thought it was fringe and weird, and they didn't get it, and they didn't get why I wasn't raising another fund because Conscience did do well. So there's just a lot of confusion and misconceptions that I had to navigate during that process. And ultimately, the pre-seed round came together, I would say, primarily from personal reputation than anything to do with the company or even. I don't even think a lot of the investors necessarily liked the company when they invest in the pre-seed round. Now I feel like they're pretty hyped on it, but initially not so much.
No, this is good background, and I think that that's relevant to the fundraising story, which is you were a VC before. You had your own fund, you had your own micro VC that, like you said, was actually doing relatively well. And so the common thought in terms of your path was like, go raise more money, go raise another fund.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting thing to call out because of what it means in terms of your own conviction as a founder. It's like it's not like you were struggling and had nothing to do. You had something great in the hand and made a decision to go after something that people were like, "What are you doing, Ariana?"
Yeah, I mean, even before that, I was looking for a CEO. So there were a lot of LinkedIn posts and JDs, and I was working with recruiters and asking around my network. Like, didn't necessarily want to run this company. Like, I really loved being an investor. And I fell in love with the company building process just through better understanding the problem and the solution and meeting all the people in the space. So it almost happened by accident in a way. Like I was interviewing CEOs while building the company and then also prepping for the next fund all
Yeah,
simultaneously. Well, by the way, navigating my own mold illness and multiple relocations. So that was a pretty chaotic time. And it wasn't until I came to conviction, I had to let go of the concept that I was an investor because I was like very much like an ego part of me. Like I was just like, I'm an investor. I associate with that. So I had to let that go, and then also be comfortable letting go of Conscience, which was really hard to start. I think we talked about this before. It was hundreds of rejections. I had to build an LP network from scratch. So it was so much of my heart and soul and sweat that went into Conscience. So letting go of that was also very challenging for me too.
totally. And this is a good transition into something that I'm curious about. A lot of founders don't realize like one of the challenges with raising any round of capital or any capital, so capital for your fund or your pre-seed round or the seed round that you just raised, is that it always seems like there is a sticking point with investors or the common thing that people are concerned about.
Yeah.
And there's always an evolution of that. And you touched on it a little bit, but in the early days when you decided, okay, actually I am going to raise money for this company as the founder and CEO, what are the types of things that you kept running into from investors or why they didn't want to do it?
By far, the number one reason was around TAM. They didn't believe in the market size. That has since shifted. Like now, every investor is coming in saying, "Oh my gosh, how is this such a huge market unaddressed?" It's a complete phase shift in sentiment, and that just happened over the last few months. Prior to that, I felt like I had to justify our existence as a company. Like it was
Yeah,
very clear that very few investors were bought into the TAM. They didn't understand the market. They didn't necessarily believe that mold could cause these health issues, despite there being hundreds of publications around this, even outside of our providers. They didn't believe that this protocol has perhaps efficacy. Like there were just a number of objections that I had to run into. And it was after the market, like let's say the investor believed in the market size, then it just felt like death by a thousand cuts after that. because there was so much skepticism. But now that it's tied to this cultural awakening and even like investors posting online about there being a market in the mold space, that completely shifted everything. I don't think there's necessarily far more data now. Maybe some more notable people coming out talking about their SIRS diagnosis or chronic inflammatory response syndrome and talking about
Yeah.
mold. But beyond that, there wasn't much different in the market besides maybe VCs tweeting, hey, there's opportunity in mold.
Yeah. So I actually don't want to let you go on this. I want to push a little bit harder here because part of part of this challenge that you went through is a challenge that like a lot of founders who want to break into new spaces that aren't in the zeitgeist just yet. Have you thought about like what investors were missing and how did you overcome that? Is that something that was just reputation based and they're like, fine, we're gonna let Ariana work on a tiny, tiny market,
Yeah.
but she knows what she's supposed to build here? Or was there something that you were able to unlock in investors? I'm just curious if you have an idea for why did everyone not quite understand what you deeply understood right away?
I think there's a few reasons. One, there is a strong mimetic desire component, right? Like I think investors do follow herd mentality. And if there's even the ones that state they back big, bold ideas that are differentiated and these like pioneering founders, in reality, they don't want to look dumb. So going out on a limb is not really what a lot of these investors like to do. So I think what shifted it the most, hindsight, was investors tweeting. So that was the watershed moment that then shifted a lot of investor perception. After that, I think it was a messaging issue. I leaned really hard into Moldco versus being the generation that ends chronic illness and addressing the biggest medical blind spots and helping Americans achieve aspirational health. It was too much about the mold related illness narrative versus this like broader vision because the parent company is called the Immune Co. It's not just Moldco. Our vision's to spin out Limeco and Longco, and these are the biggest medical blind spots, namely to do with mold and biotoxin related illness. So there's this underlying R&D layer that maps to all these different storefronts. So I think it was a messaging issue second, and then after that, unclear. It was just maybe not like a thesis fit, or they took the meeting out of a curiosity, but it probably wouldn't be something they can visualize on their portfolio page. So I think there was just like other like fit related issues after that.
Totally. Before I jump on the investors tweeting thing, is that something that you were able to encourage or stimulate, or it just happened coincidentally?
I'm not sure my role in that. I think I was really loud about mold for a while, and I have a lot of investors in my network. I was giving away free lab tests and educating people, so perhaps there was a role there. We've been posting a lot of content about it, so I think Have you heard of the three tigers? Like
Oh,
you see, one tiger, people are they're like, oh, they take notice, and it's like, okay, they kind of forget about it. Two tigers, people are on edge, they're looking around, and three tigers, everyone runs, right? You have the three tigers. So I think it was some of that. Like some people just have to hear the idea multiple times from multiple different sources to then take action, talk about it, look at it more deeply. And I think it helps that other people that were credible beyond myself were speaking about it too for social proof to then cause this tweeting dynamic.
I
Yeah.
love that three tigers analogy, and that's a really helpful thing for people to hear. So that was your pre-seed round. Huge question marks around TAM. Maybe it was just something no one had ever thought about, and maybe you got better at sort of packaging this into maybe bigger vision and other things that could be bolted on. But you just announced an $8 million round.
Yeah, it's very
Very, very impressive. Very, very cool to see that evolution so quickly. But all rounds have things, right? Everything isn't easy when it comes to raising big rounds, even if there is an announcement. So things probably shifted or maybe not. I wonder as you started generating revenue and had a stronger story, maybe more people talking about mold, how going out to raise this round changed. Was this an easy one that was like preempted, or was there still stuff that you needed to be working on to overcome? When we come back, we get into how Ariana's $8 million round actually unfolded and why it was still one of the hardest stretches of the entire journey. There are a ton of easy to make mistakes when growing a startup. I feel like I've either made them all myself or seen them all as an advisor and investor. One super common one is waiting too long to bring in expert help around managing company finances. I get why that happens though. You're not a tiny company anymore, but you feel like you're not big enough to have an in-house finance team and don't want to waste money. My advice to you is to avoid the mistake of just winging it. This is not a time to fake it till you make it. At least talk to someone early so that you can hear about how the additional help could actually save you money and improve your operations. If you're looking for recommendations on who to talk to, check out Propeller Industries. They've worked with hundreds of venture to growth stage startups, so have a ton of deep knowledge to help you avoid major bumps and set your company up for success, whether it's talking to investors or planning for future growth. Set up a free call by going to fundedpod.com/propeller. That's PROPELLER, and tell them we sent you. They're giving Funded listeners a one-time $2,500 new client credit if you work with them for 3 months.
This was a really hard round. First of all, it took place starting last year. It was during the elections, it was during the holidays, during New Year. It was also during this news cycle where the sentiment in healthcare was almost every healthcare company is going bankrupt and having a down round. So there was a lot of that going on. It was one of the toughest quarters in healthcare. We ended up closing in February earlier this year. We announced quite late. So that was actually also pre-revenue too. So there were a lot of factors working against us. We ultimately way oversubscribed. We turned down quite a bit of capital towards the end. There was more momentum once we had a lead. And then we got two leads, and our two leads are Cantos and Collab Fund. But that was a tough round. Like there were a lot of conversations, a lot of people just not getting it, a lot of skepticism, a lot of just like, I think, poorly diligenced responses to. I'm thinking of one firm at the moment where I was just like, I can't believe you put this in an email. But that was
Well, honestly, like if you don't, we don't have to name names, but this is the start of, I think, exactly what people need to hear, because the announcement is so amazing, right? And it is amazing. $8 million in a really hard time to raise capital for healthcare. But one of the stories or one of the messages people need to understand is that this stuff is not easy. Do you remember any of like the hardest experiences or like gut punches, especially in this last round, that you can share?
it was just a lot of rejection, like and rejections almost immediately. Like I could see the lack of interest on the first call. Almost hardly any of the first calls went to a second call. My current investors were wondering what was going on. Like then some of them lost faith. I could tell during the process because initially they were wanting to re-up, and then it seemed like they changed their minds during the process. So it was tough. And then also to keep up team morale during that too. And then also, the perception coming in is I'm well networked. Like I know a lot of these investors and they know who I am. So it was just like that was also giving bad signals too in the beginning. It really flipped once we got a lead. Then the sentiment really changed and we were able to close. But prior to that, very few people, I think, wanted to go out on a limb and back something so niche and weird. And I don't think they just bought it, like, candidly.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that. It sounds like Collab Fund maybe was the first to jump in, and it always seems like you're either dying of thirst or you're drowning, which is exactly what you experience of like, no, 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 until all of a sudden it's like, fuck, we can't take all of this. For the first fund that really raised their hand and said, we want to lead this, do you remember what might have been the strongest influence there? Was it, had you known the partners there for a really long time, so there's a personal relationship? Did a message come out? Did a milestone get hit? Like, what do you think the tipping point in that specific relationship was?
The strongest believers in the last round had a personal tie to what we're doing. So it was actually Ami at Cantos, who I've known for a while. We met early on when I was building Conscience, and I met Ian too. And we've stayed in touch since then. So Ami had a strong personal story, and this was the company she always envisioned building. So she went to bat for us, and that quickly led to a term sheet. And then Collab Fund was a very fast follow, equal check size. And then we started getting almost back-to-back yeses after that. But I've seen this on the Conscience side as well. Like a lot of these founders have a whole string of no's, and you just can't get discouraged by that because you just need one strong social signal, and then the whole game flips entirely. Like investors are these like there is a groupthink happening essentially. Like I said with the tweet, we saw it there. We saw it with the round. So the more you can have those dynamics be in your favor, like just get strong social signals as early as possible, the easier the round will be for you.
That's awesome. And did did you go out to raise eight out the gate, or in your mind was it something less, and then it got oversubscribed up?
Yeah, it was supposed to be just 5 million, and then we ended up doing 7 million on a priced round, and then we had overflow interest. So, and I think we ended up turning down like 4 to 5 million for that round, and then we did an extra million on a safe note at a higher valuation post money cap. So, yeah, it just kind of like escalated like that the final weeks, and then I think I upset some of the investors having to cut down their check size to fit everyone in. And then I ended up having to decline people that earlier on I said yes to before we had so much interest. So there was a bit of that going on as well. I have those people flagged for the next round that we raised. We just couldn't fit them into this prior round earlier this year.
You'll do right by them at some point. Well, that's really cool. But it does sound like, as you were raising this round, it was something maybe that felt like you were down to the wire.
Oh no, we had plenty of cash in the bank. I kept things really lean. I didn't take a salary. I spent $60,000 our first year plus. Like we had plenty of cash. So we were fine. I always go into rounds expecting it to take a while, and I like to also go in with at least 9 months of runway too. Like bare minimum. I just never want to be in a position fundraising where it is down to the wire. That's like you lose a lot of leverage in the conversations.
Spoken like a true XVC to know exactly how to play this. No, that's really good to know, but still probably discouraging, right? Like you go out there hoping people see the same thing that you do, and no one wants to spend time raising capital that long, right? It's a distraction. It takes you away from what you need to do. But do you remember that moment that you found out that Ami and Cantos were actually going to do it? Because like that had to have felt amazing.
Yeah, I felt vindicated. I felt seen. I felt like, oh my God, like finally, like someone really gets what we're doing and not just gets what we're doing, but like acts like a co-founder and this is their vision for life. Like it was incredible. And it just felt like a blessing. And in hindsight, they were exactly the right firm to lead this. Like if I were to do this process over again, it would be Cantos. Like they just showed up in all of the ways that met everything on my investor manifesto. So it just worked out.
How did Ami reach out and let you know? Was it an email? Was it a call?
It was a catch up coffee in SF. I mentioned that I was
Oh,
meeting.
in person?
Yeah, in person. And this was like early on in the raise. By the way, do you hear my puppy? Is he like,
Very cute. Don't worry about it.
oh my gosh, he's he wants attention. Yeah, so it was an in person coffee meeting, and I was meeting with a firm out in SF, and I actually wrote them a notebook because I was just like, I have to get investors down the rabbit hole. Like I have to get them to see what I see. So I like made this creative journal taking this investor down the rabbit hole. So then I shared that with Ami. I was like, hey, like this is what I'm going to present to this investor later today. And she asked all the right questions. She did a lot of research beforehand. Like she was just so genuinely excited about what we are building, and it got me pumped. And that was the best meeting I had in the entire raise process. I think she's just wonderful.
Yeah, and it wasn't even like a pitch. It was just a catch up, and at the end, she's just like, "Hey, I want to lead this."
Yeah, exactly. And there was still like a lot of rejection too. So
Yeah,
it was pretty intense.
that's awesome. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think the other takeaway is that it's not like you were sitting on your hands as you were racing. You guys were still pushing and making progress in the company, which is I think one of the biggest misses a lot of founders have when they go raise capitals. They don't realize like you got to keep moving, right? You might talk to these investors over many months and they need to know that you're continuing to say what you said you were going to do, right? So
Yeah, it helps getting really organized going into a raise process. Like, do the data room in advance, have all the materials prepped, know all the FAQs, have a spreadsheet of everyone you're talking to, and rank them in terms of priority. And then you also have to do a lot at once for a raise. Like, you shouldn't be extending your raise process over several months and like staging so many investors. You should have like a big batch of investors at a time
Yeah.
to help drive like that tidal wave, right? Like, so there's just a lot going on top of running the business to do a raise correctly. Yeah.
And then you talked about losing a bit of team morale, et cetera. But once you were able to close this round, is that something that you generally celebrate with the team, with yourself? Do you kind of do a little dance? Like, what's your normal reaction to this?
I need to celebrate our wins more often. That's something the team tells me. I don't think we did enough to celebrate because in my mind I'm like, okay, cool, check mark, on to the next. Like, let's just keep going and marching forward. And also, I don't really view like a raise as a big win. It's just a tool to get to the big win. So like, I was excited it was done, but it wasn't something I was like really overemphasizing either.
Yeah. I mean, it's a common thought and the right thing, which is that fundraise is not the goal. So a lot of people say you shouldn't celebrate it, but I'm sort of the mindset of your teammates about that you should appreciate like the journey and everything that you're able to get to, because obviously there are a ton of lows and like, and if you don't celebrate and recognize the highs, that can be hard to keep going. So I hope you find time and energy to celebrate with the team.
Yeah, thank you.
The journey you went through, like, you have been a VC for a number of years, but I think jumping into the seat creates all sorts of new experiences. You probably saw a ton of fundraisers, a lot of people operating company from the seat that you're in, but going through it is just like a completely different thing. I wonder if now you have new takeaways that you would share with founders, either for fundraising or for just running companies, things that you're like, man, I just didn't see this until I was actually doing it. Would love to share that with the audience.
Oh my gosh, so many. Wow, so many. I think building the right team as early as possible and figuring out how to empower them as early as possible, really important. Sounds obvious. And then the other big one too is around having a really clear KPI and um, designing the momentum towards that KPI, like versus just doing a bunch of things. Because going from 0 to 1 is so hard. You have to do like 100 things all at once. It feels like, but if you can find that single path to get there as quickly as possible versus building out the 100 things, you just make your life so much easier because you can do that. And we did that. It was a lot of chaos and we came out of it just fine, but we're really intense. Like, everyone was working crazy hours. I felt like we got to our end goal slower than if we would have just had that very efficient path and cut out all the other distractions.
It's funny, both of those pieces of advice are ones that like is easy to give as an investor, but like when you're in the seat, you're like, oh, that's what it's like to have the right team in place that's empowered.
Yeah.
That's what it's like to be like narrowly focused around a KPI. It's good to hear it again.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard. Like, it's hard finding these like A+ people that you feel like you can trust with that, right? And convincing them to join your team so early, and then also really having the wisdom to know what that one KPI is, and then having the confidence to just keep focusing on that continuously. Like, a lot of fear and anxiety creeps in that maybe that isn't the right focus area, or hey, there's opportunity here. Should we also get pulled in this direction? Or do I really know what this person is working on, and is that really the right decision for the business? But if I spend so much time there, like, then all this other stuff isn't getting done. So like, when you're in the mess, and also it feels like you're painting on a blank canvas, there aren't clear rules, there isn't clear direction either, like especially something as like esoteric as a new model in healthcare and a new focus in healthcare. Like, there's just so many different directions you can go, so narrowing that down is actually quite hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, last question. Given your seat in terms of XVC or probably still quasi VC, I mean, your fund is still running, or there's still companies that are running. People know you, you're highly networked. I was like asking if there are founders that you've met recently or companies that you've seen that are like up and coming, things that we should keep an eye on. Maybe we'll have them on funded in a couple of years when they raise capital. But it's a good chance to say like, is there a company out there that just isn't getting the attention that they deserve?
I really respect a founder, Micha Breakstone of Somite AI. He recently just raced around with Khosla, prior founder of Chorus AI. I think he's just an exceptional leader. He's a fantastic advisor and mentor. I just really resonate with his leadership style and how he shows up with integrity and with his team. So yeah, beyond what he's building, which is really cool. And I'm an investor. Like, I just think he's a wonderful human, and I aspire to be like that.
Love that. That was my conversation with Ariana Thacker, founder and CEO of Moldco. What stood out to me in this one is how much of Ariana's story is about holding conviction in a very uncomfortable way in the face of her former VC peers. When we come back, I'm going to debrief the episode and chat about this a bit more. Guidance, feedback, and accountability. These are the three things that the best startup founders understand make a difference in executing. When it comes to raising capital, even if you have advisors who could provide those things for you, it's really hard to ask for it over and over again on a weekly basis, which is what you need during crunch time. That's what Adamant Fundraising was created for. It's a program and community designed to provide founders the weekly support they need to prepare for and execute the best possible fundraise. If you're getting ready to raise capital, check us out at adamantfundraising.com. We'd love to support you. Also, new members get 20% off by mentioning this ad. Okay, guys, I'm really excited to debrief this episode because there are so many things to pull apart here, so many insights to talk through, but also because I've known Ariana for like 5 years. In fact, when I was first testing the concept of funded, she had just closed fundraising for her fund. And I wanted to talk to her a little bit about what that fundraising process was like. And we talked about the endless rejections she received talking to LPs, because fundraising for startups is hard, but fundraising for funds is about 1,000 times harder. Anyways, the audio for that episode didn't work out, so we never published that episode. But here we are 4-ish years later, and she has gone on to jump from her seat as a successful VC fund manager to running her own company as an operator, as a startup operator. And so my debrief is really all about this idea of conviction and how important conviction is in fundraising and deciding to go fundraise, and also to actually running a process that you can see to the end and convincing investors at the end that this is a bet that they should make. So what do I need to say about conviction? Well, in a general comment around conviction, of course, an investor needs to read in you that you truly believe what you're doing. Like, you see the vision and you're really racing towards this future vision where you see this massive company out there. And if you can't communicate that, or if you can't transfer that feeling to an investor, it can be very hard to convince an investor that this is both an idea worth backing and a founder worth backing. And so there are a couple things that stood out to me here. One is, oh my God, it is incredibly uncomfortable, I think, to be a founder pitching to VCs in any situation, but one where you're pitching to other people that know you from a different world. Like, the feeling that they are judging you, or they think that this is a bad idea, could eat at a lot of people. And if you don't have deep conviction into what you're doing, I can see you, one, showing up and wilting under that pressure and not showing up in the right way. And two, after a handful of no's, a couple dozen no's, really saying like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's really uncomfortable. And so to be able to fight past that means that you have real conviction, means that Ariana had real conviction. And the second thing that I think is interesting to hear, and I think it answers or it gives people context for a question I get all the time around, should I leave my job? Do I need to leave my job? Like, what are the reasons, or what are the points at which it's okay not to leave my job versus showing that I'm leaving my job versus fully leaving my job and then raising capital? Well, I'll tell you this. VCs are always looking for some kind of signal that tells them how much conviction does this founder have. And while it might not be fair to say, well, I have a family and kids and whatever, and I'm forcing you to leave your job before I invest in you. It is an indication of how much you believe in this opportunity. And while I don't think people need to leave their jobs necessarily to be successful in running a startup, if you are trying to show how much conviction you have in an idea, then burning the boats and going all in on an idea is one of the main ways to do that. To stack on top of that, leaving a really successful, really valuable, really high paying job, really high prestige job, like running your own fund in order to start a company is an amazing way of showing how much conviction you have. So I think that hearing the story that Ariana went through in terms of all the rejection she went through, the doubt that people had in her idea, but how she relied on her own conviction to keep going, and how that probably was a huge element in finally convincing her first lead to jump all in with her, is something that all of you can learn from. You guys can go to school around what it takes to have the conviction to run a company that will get investors excited. And you can ask yourself, how much do I believe in this? How much excitement do I have in this idea? And am I ready to go talk to investors about it? It might be the case that you're excited about it, but there are some gaps in your own understanding and your own conviction, in which case I would highly recommend you run experiments, you gather information, you launch certain versions of your product in order to convince yourself so that you can go convince others to give you money. All right. I hope that makes sense to you. That's the debrief. If you're looking for more insights, strategies, and support around fundraising, check out my work at admnt.com or find me on social. I'm at Jayeh, that's Jayeyeh, on almost every platform. I respond to newsletter replies and DMs, so hit me up. This episode was produced by Abby Garcia and made possible by our sponsor, Vanta, the leading security and compliance platform. Check them out at vanta.com/funded for $1,000 off their service.